Welcome back to the Veterinary Business Podcast. Today we are tackling the invisible friction that is slowing down your team and threatening your profitability: outdated technology. I'm your host, Dan Adisha, and I'm glad you're here. If you have ever felt like your practice management software is working against you rather than for you, you aren't alone. The industry is currently relying on legacy systems that are overloaded, unsecured, and simply not built for the speed of modern medicine. This isn't just an annoyance, it is a liability. Outdated tech creates security risks, drains team morale, and puts an invisible cap on your clinic's efficiency. Getting your digital foundation right is no longer optional. It is the new standard care. So joining us to unpack this is Clint Latham, the founder of Luca Veterinary Data Security. Clint has dedicated his career to helping veterinary teams modernize their infrastructure and protect their patient data. He helps owners navigate the complex shift from digital chaos to secure, streamlined operations. Today, we are going to be exploring the hidden risks inside your current tech stack, why cybersecurity is now a patient safety issue, and practical steps to modernize your practice without disrupting daily life. This episode is brought to you by the Veterinary Business Institute. If you are looking to strengthen your visibility and attract ideal clients, visit us to book your complimentary practice growth strategy session. Now, that being said, let's get into the conversation. And of course, Clint, welcome to the Veterinary Business Podcast. Now, Clint, veterinary medicine is becoming increasingly digital. From your perspective, what is the biggest technology blind spot that clinics still overlook despite believing they're covered?
Yeah, there's a couple of different ways I can go. There's two ways I can go with this. There's from I think a technology perspective as a whole, and then there's kind of more like the cybersecurity side of things. So I think from the technology perspective as a whole, one of the things that I think most people overlook is just like not having a basic understanding of what everything in their hospital does. You should know, you don't have to know how to configure it, set it up, manage it, maintain it, but you should know like why it's there and why you spent money on it. I can't tell you the number of times we bring a practice on and like the first thing we'll do is like shut down or get rid of a piece of equipment, and they're like, oh well, like my old IT guy was like, we needed that and we spent $5,000 on it or whatever, and we're like, yeah, you don't need it, it's overkill and it's making your life a nightmare, and so we're going to get rid of it. And so I think from that perspective, a lot of times it's like, which is tough, right? Because like when I go to the vet because I need somebody that's an expert in medicine to help make sure my dog lives a happy, long life, right? And so a lot of times you're looking to your IT professional that may be servicing the hospital for the same thing, right? Where you're like, hey, I want a happy, thriving practice from a technology perspective, and I want it all to work. But unfortunately, like in the tech space, I think there are a number of problems where it's like, in VetMed, a lot of times we're afraid to ask, we're afraid to say like, hey, this is a service you need because it's going to be expensive. Or I see a lot of times the opposite effect, where it's like a lot of times it's overkill and we're selling a lot of things because we can, and we can hide behind technical terms, and we just tell you that you need it, and you're like, cool, well, you're the IT person, I'm going to trust you, so I'm going to do it. So I think that would be the first thing, not having a good understanding of why something is there. And if you have an IT person and you ask them like, well, why do I need this? Why are you trying to sell me a $15,000 firewall when I can buy like an $800 one or whatever? Like, why do I need that one? Why is it specifically? And if your IT person tries to hide behind like technical jargon to overcomplicate things and can't explain to it in plain English, then I would ask questions, right? Like you should, in plain English, understand why something is going into your practice and for what reason. from a cybersecurity perspective, I think it's just the basics. To make this really easy, I actually wrote an ebook I wrote when I first started the company, and it's still relevant today. And it's called 5 Simple Steps you can do to protect your hospital. And it doesn't require you to purchase anything. It is just 5 simple things you can do or implement in your practice yourself that take you like 80% of the way there. Like in technology and especially in cybersecurity, nothing is 100%. So nothing's going to get you 100% there. But with some of these basics, you'd be surprised of how close it'll get you to that 100% mark. Because with a cyber attack, it's I heard a great analogy at an ABMA webinar when they brought on like a human health cybersecurity expert, and so I totally robbed this from them. But cyber attacks are it's like a waterfall. So a river flows down the path of least resistance, and so the question is when that attack gets deployed to the World Wide Web, is your business or is your hospital the path of least resistance? If there's some resistance and struggle there that prevents it from getting in with some basic things you can do, then they're gonna move on. They're gonna do something else, right? They're gonna look for the next, the other business down the street that hasn't done some of these basic things to stop some of these vulnerabilities, and they'll move on. And so really it's like, are you the path of least resistance? There definitely are some additional things I think you should do on top of that. Some areas where you should probably make some small investments, but from a just like trying to understand and get like your feet wet and kind of a DIY approach. We have 5 simple things you can do over a weekend or whatever that will take you probably 80% and 75 to 80% of the way there.
Okay. Really appreciate that wonderful analogy right there. That really makes it easier for our practice owners to understand cybersecurity, right? So I would like to know if you could perhaps, share a specific horror story, anonymized, of course, where a clinic thought they were safe because they had the IT person, but still suffered a catastrophic breach.
Yeah. Oh man. There's a lot. Where do I even start? I guess a good example would be a hospital. And this is something that we see a lot. So we'll see hospitals that are still on Avamar, Cornerstone, Impromed, one of the server-based systems, and they think that they have backups. And in this case, they might even be working with some of the titans of the industries, right? They might be using a service from IDEX, or they might be using a service from Covetrus to back up Avamar, or they might in Impromed, so they might be using one of those like cloud-based services. The problem is that nobody's checking it, nobody's monitoring it, and a lot of times, sometimes too, the IT guy will be like, yeah, we're backing it up. But then once things happen, and now we have to rely on those backups, are they actually valid? And so there are a couple things like you have to look at when looking at backups and trying to protect data. And you have to ask yourself in any disaster situation, how much data are you actually willing to lose? Because in any recovery situation, you're never going to have a live data set. And so it's how much data am I willing to lose? And then does my current backup system actually meet those needs? Anytime I'm at a conference or speaking at a conference and I'm in a room full, practice managers and owners, I'm like, okay, who can go a week without their data? Who wants to lose a week? Nobody's yeah, me. The general consensus is an hour, right? So that means that your backup set for whatever data that is, whether it's you're protecting dental images, that's another one that's super common. The dental images are just sitting on that laptop, on that cart that's being swung around. And it may not even be a hacking incident. It could be, Sarah's working really hard. This patient's anesthetized, and then she just swings the cart too fast, and it falls off, and now it's shattered, right? And now all of our dental images are gone, and we didn't have a basic procedure in place. We weren't pushing them to our cloud pack system or publishing them there. We didn't have basic backup procedures. So it's how much data are you willing to lose? And so we've had a number of practices where we had one ER practice that called us multiple times. And it was the third time they got hit with ransomware, and they still didn't have a solid backup procedure in place. And this one was really sad because even afterwards, it was an Impromed hospital, and there's some things with SQL you can do to get kind of clever because it's a SQL database to kind of recover the database from log files and stuff, and we were able to get a lot of it back, but then we're like, hey, this is what you need to do. Like, this is how you should be protecting the data. And they were like, nah, we're good. It's like, well, and the sad thing is like they had paid the ransom, I think, the first 2 times. So it's like once you pay, you become a direct target. So most cases, you're not a direct target. You just are the path of least resistance. Once you pay that ransom or you pay out anything, you're going to be a direct target for anybody because they know you'll pay. And then you don't have the proper protections in place. And so you kind of get put on like a blacklist on the internet, like, hey, this guy will actually pay. We've seen email scams where people, how many hospitals are using like animalhospitalY@gmail.com. And so they will use, a lot of times we'll see them like mask. So because you're using animalhospitalY@gmail.com, they'll make animalhospitalY1@gmail.com. And then a lot of times because there's no basic password policies in place, or people are using the same passwords across multiple devices, they'll get into that free Gmail account. Once they get into that account, then they will, they'll hack. Generally from there, they can figure their way onto the network, or they can get into the system. And then we've seen a lot of times where they download old invoices. So this is whether you're cloud-based or have a local server system. They'll kind of hop around, use some basic hacking tricks to kind of hop from your primary email account into your practice management system, and then from there they'll exfiltrate a bunch of invoices that are pretty current with all of your customers' contact information, and then using that email address that's like similar to your primary hospital email address, they will email your customers and like, hey, this is like a good example because it's like, hey, remember when your Yorkies came in, you had to do like $1,000 worth of dental work because you have to pull teeth like every 6 months with your Yorkies? Our credit card machines were down and it didn't actually get processed. So if you could you use this link just to pay your bill? We greatly appreciate it. And it's a fully branded invoice. It's a valid invoice from your practice management system. So that's all legit. The thing is it's just already been paid. And now they're just like, and then so then you're left not only like paying that now instead of like your receptionist just like being buried in like normal phone calls, now they're also getting phone calls of like, what's this email? Like, what is this? And you're like, I don't know. And we see that a lot. Another thing with emails, we've seen a number of times where practices will be like expanding or growing. And we've had practices where basically they figured out how the practice owner communicates, who the accountant was, and then they pretend to be like, hey, the accountant, they'll reach out to the accountant as pertaining to be the owner. Hey, I know we're getting ready to do this new X-ray table with IDEX or whatever. We need to wire $25,000 or $40,000 to this account so we can get the new equipment in. And the accountant will be like, are you sure? And then they'll use the exact same speech and language that the practice manager uses so that it all looks legit. And they're like, yep, cool. And then they wire the money. And then a lot of times they don't find out that the money's gone until like they get greedy. Like, so in a lot of cases, then these practices are calling us because now they're trying to wire $90,000 or $100,000. And the account's like, we don't have that kind of money. And so now they're calling the owner and they're like, I've never said that, right? And AI makes it worse because now they can just scrape all of your email data, tell the AI model to learn how this person, and just like, hey, how do I talk? Help me write as if I was writing an email, and it will mimic the language super, super quick and easy. And so they can craft language just like you would in the blink of an eye, and then they'll create rules and stuff to hide it all. So you're still working in your email account, but you have no idea somebody's there and making a bunch of reaching out to a lot of important people. And so we see that a lot. We've seen practices that are getting ready to sell. And then we had one case, this was like 5 or 6 years ago, especially it was like during the big corporate boom. I mean, it seems like the corporate buyouts have kind of slowed down a little bit, but this was like when it was just like gangbusters. Like if you owned a veterinary hospital, it didn't really seem like it matter if you were open for a day or two, somebody's gonna be knocking on your door to buy it. And this guy was like, all right, cool, I'm like ready to retire. Well, he had been doing some like questionably ethical things like in his personal life that didn't really affect his business, but from a cultural perspective, we might say like, hey, these are like questionable life decisions. Well, this was all happening like on his Facebook account. And they had hacked his Facebook account, and then from there they got access to his email account. They saw he was trying to sell his practice for who knows how much money, and then so the hacker basically went to the corporate group and was like, "Yo, we are going to publicly release all of this stuff that the owner and the primary doctor has been doing, unless you pay us X amount of money." And the corporate is like, "We're not paying you." And then they looked at the other guy and like, "We can't risk losing the business and all of our customers, so we're out." So like one guy lost pretty much all of his retirement, regardless of whatever you want to do in your personal life. And I won't say any of the details to help anonymize them, but it's like, you know, like you got to have some basic protections there, because now it just basically ruined your retirement. And now, like, you know, I haven't heard, he may have sold now, but yeah, at that point I'm like, sorry dude, there isn't much we can do once they have access.
I mean, Clint, wow, that you really did justice to the horror story aspect of you. That question.
I'd say the good news is, though, is like these are like once a quarter kind of things. You know, like it's like every 3 months or so we might hear something like this. So it's not every day that we have to deal with this kind of stuff, which is good. But yeah, probably more common. This is still more common than it should be.
Yeah. But this is truly what can happen, you know, if we keep on, neglecting the importance of data security, right?
Yeah.
And over there, it wasn't just the practice owner. It wasn't just in the practice, you know, it's your clients as well. Their data is also going to be held accountable. And then from there, of course, you know, your corporate potential, on that side of things. I mean, this just opened my mind to a whole plethora of attacks, you know, possible just from the simple fact that we are not changing our password, you know, from one channel to the other. So does this?
Yeah, again, like basic stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Very basic stuff. And I would like to get your experience on, like you just touched upon it, the legal liability of this. You know, do most owners realize they might be breaking state laws regarding data privacy without knowing it?
Yeah, that's a big problem. You know, like at most conferences, especially in before the whole COVID thing, because at that time you had GDPR, which was the General Data Protection Regulation, which had gone live in Europe, and so like the big thing was like, okay, well, what's going to happen in the U.S. Now, GDPR I think is great from the consumer standpoint. Like it does provide some real protections for the consumer, and of course, in the U.S., we got, I guess the closest thing would be CCPA, which is the California Consumer Protection Act, which I think, like, to this point, don't quote me on this because I haven't looked recently, but I think it's anywhere from like 16 to 20 other states have pretty much adopted almost the exact same language. It's very, very similar. And in this instance, it's not as consumer friendly, right? It's not as like, I don't have as many rights as a consumer as I do under GDPR. But with that being said, there are still some basic things. And actually we were working on early on, actually, like again, during the big like ransomware boom where we were seeing, it was just like NBA had gotten hits. There were like a lot of big organizations, and we were working with another group of hospitals that before we weren't working with them yet, they had brought us in to try to figure out like what had happened later. And I remember we were working like directly with their attorney, who was like a data specific attorney. And so we were talking, and I think the easiest way to think about it, it's far more complicated this, but the easiest way to think about it is like with CCPA or any of these data protection laws is like the triangulation of somebody's private data, and you have to take reasonable measures to protect that data. And so what does that mean? So like if I can steal enough data from you to know who Clint Latham in Colorado, in Grand Junction, Colorado versus Clint Latham in Santa Monica, California, that's data that you have to protect, and you have to take reasonable measures to do so. And then depending upon the state, there are different requirements. And so you may have to pay for like data protection services, like the LifeLock kind of thing, like where they get credit monitoring and that sort of stuff. There's a bunch of notification requirements, and there's a whole slew of other things that may come about if you don't take reasonable measures. And again, reasonable measures is going to be determined by like, well, what was the last case that, was prosecuted, and what had they done that wasn't considered reasonable enough, and had you done more than that? And so there's quite a few ambiguities, and each state is going to be different. So the good news is I think if you, again, if you, the ebook I talked about, if you're doing those things regularly, if you do have some extra protections outside of that, I think you're, again, talk to your own local attorney, maybe a local data attorney, to get clarification. But I would think that at that point you'd be more than reasonable. And so if something at that point happened, you'd be like, hey, we were doing everything we could. We had proper backups in place. We had proper monitoring in place, but it still got through. And at that point, that's why there's cybersecurity insurance and stuff like that.
Thank you, Clint, for that. Wonderful answer. Really appreciate your input there. So, Clint, data security and cyber risk are growing issues across the profession. What are some most common vulnerabilities you see in veterinary practices? And of course, what are some of the simple steps that owners can take today to reduce that risk?
So I could go through the 5 that I talk about in the ebook, and if you want the steps on how to do it, you can go download that for free. And that's on our website, luca.net, if you want to go download that. But I think it's number 3, but I actually think it's probably the most important. It is that if you look at your staff as a whole, if you look at the entire staff, if somebody were to make a mistake, and I don't know, and this isn't necessarily confined within the constraints of IT or cyber hacks or whatever, if your staff was to make a medical mistake, or they were to make a mistake ordering drugs or whatever, do they feel comfortable enough to come to you to let you know that they made a mistake? And what would your response be? And so you may be asking me, what the heck does that have to do with anything cybersecurity related? And I can tell you that it's if your staff feels comfortable to come to you in the event that they make a mistake, it is going to go miles. It's going to make it so much easier to figure out what had happened when what data was potentially exposed. Because the biggest problem we run into is a lot of times is that people then try to cover up their mistakes because they're afraid to go to their boss and tell them hey, I think I got hacked. And they feel bad about it. They feel that they're going to get berated. And then they delete things. They try, they're changing passwords. They're doing a whole bunch. They're trying to cover their tracks, and they're trying to make it right, which then makes it really hard from an investigative data perspective to figure out what were they trying to do? Was it just phishing? What were they looking for? Because now we don't have access to any of that stuff because you were removing stuff. And so it makes it a lot harder. Where the truth of the matter is that these people are professionals. And so a good example is I have to think about this stuff 40 plus hours a week, right? And I was actually working on another project. Actually, I was working on a human health project. And I was sitting in the airport, actually, I think on my way to VMX. And I got this email from this other auditor. And he's like, yo, Clint, I need you to take a look at this document. And it was all outlined for this human health project we were working on. I was like, okay, cool. Let me take a look. This isn't uncommon. So I clicked the link, and then it's hey, we need your Office 365 credentials to access the file. I'm like, HIPAA, makes sense. I key in my credentials, and then it was just a random government document, right? It was just a random, and I was like, this is weird. And then all of a sudden on my cell phone, I'm getting 2FA requests. So basically it's hey, somebody's trying to sign in from Bangladesh or, somewhere in South America all of a sudden. And I was like, he got hacked. And then they were communicating we would to try to get my credentials and kind of expand their reach. Well, because I had a basic thing like 2FA, they did have my username and password, but it was unique. I don't use that password anywhere else. So in a matter of a couple of seconds, I was able to just change my password. They could no longer get in. The password's completely random, so it's not like I use it anywhere else. No harm, no foul. But I think the important lessons is that it was a basic protection prevented a bigger disaster. And B, I have to think about this stuff all the time, and it happened to me. We are thinking about this. I mean, I can't tell you the number of phishing or scam emails we get like on a daily basis. I was actually joking with my team the other day. I was like, man, they are just like on a rampage. They're trying to get that holiday money, because Black Friday's coming up. It was just like ridiculous. And we even have we have filtering in place and all this stuff, and it some of the tools require us to report it, and I felt like I was reporting every other email. So the short of that piece, the long-winded, I guess now the short answer of that is if I have to think about this all the time, imagine your receptionist or your tech who's buried, right? And they're just trying to keep their head above water, and they're hopping from machine to machine, and these people are professionals. So how easy would it be to fool them and to think they're doing something right? The next piece is passwords. Yeah, use a good password manager. All of your passwords, that you should have unique passwords. Somebody could hold a gun to my head and be like, hey, I need your banking password. I'm like, dude, you're gonna have to pull the trigger because I have no idea what it is. I cannot tell you. It's 25 random characters. I have no idea what it is. A good password manager. Start with your personal life. Get your personal life in order and understand how it works, and then it becomes far easier to implement in the business, and then share passwords and all that stuff. And password managers are pretty cheap. I mean, you can get some good ones for $5 or $10 a month. It's not a terrible investment. And actually, there's some good open source ones like Bitwarden. So if you are tech savvy enough, you can host your own password server, and you can do it all for free. And the software is all open source, and so you just have the labor cost if you're willing to go that route. The next one would be update. I know it's a total pain in the butt, but those regular updates that you see on your iPhone, where it's the red dot, or it's time to update again, or even on your computer, those updates include security updates. Now, the big Microsoft and Google and companies like Facebook, they all offer what we call bug bounties. So there are ethical hackers out there that will search for vulnerabilities in their tools, and if they find them and report them to these channels, they get paid, right? And so what they'll do is they'll find these updates, they'll pay that hacker, and then they'll issue, because they know that they're not actively being exploited, they'll then update them in the next week's update or release. And so Google Chrome, anytime you can update that, that's good. And a lot of times with the computer updates, you can schedule them. So it's not happening in the middle of your receptionist trying to check somebody out. And in most cases, a lot of the equipment in most hospitals is getting pretty old, and it's full of cat hair and pet dander, and so it takes 20 minutes to reboot. Well, you can schedule these things on your computer so that they will happen at 2 a.m, and so they will happen automatically. You don't have to think about it, and it'll happen in the middle of the night. And again, all of this stuff, how to do this, is outlined in this ebook if you want to check it out. The next one is backups. What is your backup disastery? How good are your backups? Do you actually have good backups in place? I think that's probably another easy one. And then also looking at the different data sets in the hospital, what is your most important data? Do you understand what data needs to be protected? And then last but not least, there are some free tools like VirusTotal. There's a tool called Blacklight. These are some free tools online. HaveIBeenPwned.com, which basically is you can check passwords to see if they're available on the dark web. These are all free tools that you can use and leverage at no cost that have some really serious backing. I guess another good horror story would be for a while what we saw is, because veterinary medicine is always hiring, because a lot of times we'd see attacks that were designed for human medicine, but then veterinary medicine would kind of just get caught in the shrapnel because it's medical or whatever, and so they kind of get caught in the crossfire. But what we saw for a little while was actually a lot of hackers realizing the veterinary industry was always hiring, and so they would send resumes to hospitals saying hey, I'm an associate, or I'm a vet tech, I would love to apply for this job, here's my resume. Well, they would download that resume and open it, but little they know that PDF or whatever had malware in it that was then exploited onto the computer, where it was a keyboard logger, so they were recording every keystroke or whatever. So now they had all your passwords and everything you were typing, and then they had a backdoor into the computer. We had one that was deployed ransomware as an Oregon hospital. She just opened the resume and then like in most cases ransomware, they'll wait 7 to 10 days before they actually deploy. But in this case, it was immediate and it just started spreading. But you could like drag and drop these files into VirusTotal and it'll take 30 seconds to scan them, like less than that, 15 seconds. And if you get any red flags, then you can report back like, hey, there's something weird with this file, like, and then at that point it'll probably become pretty clear that like this is something malicious. They're not really trying to like apply for a job.
Okay, I mean, Clint, that's so first off, hackers are also seasonal.
Yes. Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
They definitely know when the reception is going to be overwhelmed and busy, and they know that's the time when they can slip in a little bit more easily, perhaps. And I really appreciated the way you framed this into a bit more empathy-related basis as a solution, right? Because when we're talking about all of this cybersecurity data, it's all cold. It's all code and it's all, it's seemingly cold. But what you brought up right there is very interesting. And I think probably underrated, ensure that you have that kind of safe work environment in which people can admit that they made a mistake and come to you, and how that can also, cybersecurity is a very interesting connection right there. So thank you so much.
And not to toot my own horn, but I feel like I'm the only data professional that like talks about that aspect of it. And I actually have to give a big shout out to Josh Weissman. He's a dear friend of mine, and he runs Flourish Veterinary Consulting. And he's all about the people and culture. And it was like, I think working with him and then like seeing these experiences where I was like, oh yeah, it's like a terrible work environment. And of course they're like, it's hard for us because we see this. And so it just like put 2 and 2 together. I was like, this is probably the most important thing you do, because if they tell you, the quicker we know, the quicker it is to shut it down and remediate. But nobody thinks about it, but I think it's probably the most important thing. If there's one thing anybody gets from this, is probably like, can your staff trust you to come to you when they make a mistake? Like I tell my team, it's not that you make a mistake, it's like how do you make up for it, or how do you fix it, how do you make it right when you make a mistake? And so it's like, I think that is probably more important than all the other stuff. The other tech stuff is changing on the fly. It is changing, especially with AI, it is changing by the minute. And so it's like impossible to stay up on that stuff. But I think if you can stay up on like the culture piece, and so if something happens, it's much, much easier to get out of a sticky situation.
Got you. The mantra there is definitely, the quicker we find it out, the quicker we can fix it, right?
Yeah.
So before we continue, a quick message from the Veterinary Business Institute. To all our listeners, you can book a complimentary practice growth strategy session with Lila, a veterinary marketing strategist who's helped hundreds of clinics strengthen visibility, attract ideal clients, and grow with confidence. You'll receive a personalized analysis of your online presence along with a 12-month growth roadmap tailored just for your practice. To book this session, just visit www.veterinarybusinessinstitute.com/MSM to schedule your free session. All right. So Clint, as more cloud-based PMS, AI tools, and client communication platforms emerge, how should practices evaluate whether technology is genuinely useful or simply adding more digital noise?
Yeah, the real answer there is like, does it solve a real world problem? I had actually posted about this on LinkedIn, I think, I don't know, maybe 3 months or so ago, where I was like, I feel like we have a false AI demand in veterinary medicine. All my AI pro friends, don't get me wrong, I'm using AI-based tools every day. They're incredibly helpful. But the thing was, it's like, oh, well, it's going to change it. It's just new, and they're going to adopt it. And I was like, yes. But I think what most people don't realize is like, most vets don't even want to think about the printer, right? They don't even want to think about the headache of like having to replace labels in their printer. They don't want to, let alone like, oh, is this thing the latest and greatest like AI most magical tool in the box? And what I see from a lot of companies, I get probably I can't tell you the number of emails I get from people like, oh, hey, Clint, like we see you're like in the veterinary business and we've got this great new AI tool that's going to like revolutionize vet med. Like, we think we would be a great partner. And I'm like, get in line, dude. Like, I can't tell you how many of these emails I get every week. And honestly, like, until I like, you know, like working with the number of practices that we do, I think it's a little over 300 at this point. It's like, we're going to hear their problems, right? We are the front line for any of their technology problems because we cover it head to tail, regardless of what it is. If you got a problem with a CT machine, we're helping you navigate that, right? Not just like the computer stuff or the practice management software. And so a lot of times, you know, like if you have something that I'm hearing a lot, then I'm going to talk to you because I'm like, yeah, this is a real world problem that needs solving and we're hearing a lot and nobody's doing it. I think the other piece to this too is we're in like the space race for a cloud-based practice management system right now. And I think it's going to shake out to the top 3. If you look at like most industries, I think the cell phone world is like a great example. There are always these like random smaller players, the Boost Mobiles of the world or Crickets or whatever, right? These smaller players that are kind of always in the space. But right now you have the big 3. There was 4 for a while, but that wasn't going to last long once T-Mobile really shifted into the US market and they gobbled up Sprint, right? Because Sprint was the easy one to buy. And so now you basically have AT&T, Verizon, and T-Mobile, which are the top 3. So we are going to see a similar shakeout probably over the next 5 to 10 years of the 3 dominant players, because when you have like roughly 40,000 plus hospitals in the US, there's only so much there's only so much to go around. And so you're going to have a few key players that are going to dominate like 75 to 80% of that. And then there's going to be all these little ancillary ones that are popping up. And so where I'm going with that is that these practice management systems know that they have to the more stuff they can get under one umbrella, the easier it is going to it's going to make them more competitive and they can shuffle their way to the top. And so all of these third party tools that support or plugins, we've seen a big shift with IDEX and the amount their approach to, especially now that they purchased EasyVet a number of years ago, of how third-party players can get involved and bolt into EasyVet. And you can see that they're really investing a lot of money in software and technology to try to be one of the top players at the end of the day. And they're kind of whittling out all of these third-party players and kind of closing the door. That's not to say that if you do have a great platform that you can't make the right relationships and make it work, but having conversations with these companies all day, every day, anything that you're doing now is probably on their development list, and at some point they're going to bring it in-house. And so I would say a lot of these companies, Digitail is probably and in all transparency, I always have to say this, I have a really great relationship with Sebastian, the CEO, and so I'm a little bit biased there, but that relation came about because I just thought that they were doing amazing things, and then we just actually became great friends. But so I am very biased there. But I think when it comes to the AI tools, they're leading the charge. They were one of the first ones, and a lot of these ancillary programs that we see other companies now coming to the market, they're already doing, and they're only going to get better at it. And we see now some of the other ones now pushing as well to get into the AI space. So where I'm going with that is how do you shuffle out what is noise and what isn't? I think with that being said, and having that picture in mind, if you're on one of the bigger platforms, if the most popular practice, for new hospitals or practice management conversions, it's going to be EasyVet, which we call the Impromed of the cloud. It's 1 million clicks to do everything, just like Impromed. So even though Impromed is not an IDEX product, it's a pretty easy transition. Even though it's really hard to get off of Impromed, it should be the easiest one to migrate off of because it's a SQL database. But Impromed doesn't make it easy. Probably because Covetrus wants you to go to Pulse or eVet Practice, whatever you want to call it. But is EasyVet. Shepherd, if you just want a really simple, easy platform that's like easy to work with. We have a lot of like new doctors that really like that one. If you are really pushing though, you want a client-facing app, you want all of the latest and greatest technology and really, pushing automated dictated soap notes, the whole thing with AI dictation, your customers being able to use AI to search their medical history with their dog and get answers just on their phone, you can't beat Digitail. Those are the top three. So I would say over the last 3 years, those are the top three that we see getting deployed, or our hospitals choosing. So we don't get paid by any of them. I mentioned my relationship with Sebastian, but we have no financial ties. So like when I talk about those three, it's not because we're getting paid or I want you to go there because of us. This is just what we're actually seeing on the day-to-day and on the ground. We do see some Pulse customers. It does seem like Rhapsody with the Chewy acquisition is now just going to be kind of a solely Chewy thing. It seems like they're not really pushing and trying to go to market with that too hard. We do see like DaySmart, but honestly, like I don't know that we don't have a lot of hospitals that really love that one. That's another one.
Clint,
yeah.
Just how much should a practice owner budget, percentage wise for R&D or testing new tech? or should they wait, as you said, for that mass adoption first?
Yeah, good question. Honestly, I think for most hospitals, if you're functioning well on Avramark, for example, Avramark is a great example because it is old, but it is super easy. The workflow, the flow of how you enter the data is really user friendly. So let's say you're an Avramark hospital. Honestly, I think your money would be better spent in cleaning up, reducing the amount of technology you have in the practice, making sure you have good backups in place, redundant internet, and then making sure you have new computers. Get a business account with Dell or Lenovo or whatever so you can get business direct pricing. Get rid of that 20-year-old Sony laptop that takes 15 minutes to do anything. Those things I think have a far bigger bang for buck than a lot of software. A good example of that would be when SmartFlow was big before IDEX kind of bought it and then shut it down because EasyVet has their version of the whiteboard. But we had a lot of practices we have to have all the iPads because now we have SmartFlow. They end up using one or two, and then the rest of the iPads kind of sit in a box in the office. And so an iPad will cost you $1,000, $1,500 a pop. Not sure what they are these days. Maybe you can get a decent one for under $1,000. Now you got $5,000 sitting under your desk, right? Because you didn't really think this through, and nobody liked the typing experience, right? Nobody wants to type on an actual iPad. So when it comes to software and leaning into things, if there's something that really solves a problem for you, I don't care if it's AI based or if it's just good old normal, JavaScript or C# language or whatever. It doesn't, that part to me doesn't really matter. Don't get caught up in the marketing hype around this is the latest AI greatest thing. The real question is does it solve an actual problem? And are you going to buy or you end up going to buying a bunch of licenses and you're the one doctor that uses it and nobody else uses it because it's not really solving a real problem.
Okay. So, Clint, just, when practices move to the cloud, they often assume security is now someone else's problem.
Yeah.
Is that a dangerous fallacy in thinking?
Yes. Yeah. We have a problem in VetMed where a lot of the software developers don't even want to do the basic things like 2FA. Now, I say that with a grain of salt because there are some good ones like Instinct. If they're trying, I know they're working on getting into the GP game. I'm not sure how that has gone. I haven't heard any GP practices leveraging them, but if you're ER specialty, they're probably the best cloud-based software to use. Talking with them, they have a great token system. The way they kind of a 2FA built in that is awesome. Digitail was working with a 2FA company where basically it was typing DNA. So as you type your password, it is picking up how you type. So you have a unique typing signature. So now you can just type your password and you don't have to get a unique code. But really, other than them, EasyVet you can request and like lock out by IP address, but how many people know that? So like we have a problem in VetMed where nobody takes it seriously. I had one. He's no longer the owner because the company has since sold, but I think he's still there in like an executive standpoint. He told me, he's like, oh, cybersecurity is just like, don't click on the email from the Nigerian prince, And then when we talked about like user privacy and rights and like how I felt data should be used, that the hospital should have a conversation. He's like, if I had to follow GDPR, like I would go bankrupt. And I'm like, well, that tells me like, A, you're not really concerned about the data, and B, you're probably doing something on the back end to make money off that data without the consent of the hospital because you don't want to follow basic GDPR and like notification requirements. And this is like a common problem. And I can't tell you the number of like bolt-in tools that again provide some sort of service. There's one in particular, it's like a really bad offender. And anytime we see it at a practice, we always say like, hey, I would remove this. They kind of mask themselves as a coupon servicing tool, but really like it appears that they're just exfiltrating all of the practice management data and then selling it off. And we've seen it with some of the cloud providers, or the ones that we trust, have come to us and they're like, we're not working with them because we're like, cool, we can get you the basic information you need to accomplish what your end product is. And they're like, no, but everybody else gives us everything. And they're like, no, that's not how this works. But a lot of the big cloud providers, like just because that's the way things roll in vet med, it's just like, cool, take all of the practice data, sure, have fun, And it's like, that's not actually, speaking of which, like Vet Verify, those guys are absolutely amazing, and I love everything they're doing. And like one of the first conversations we had just privately was, he's like, I can't believe how many practice management systems are like, cool, well, we'll just give you access to everything and you just could do whatever you want. And he's like, no. Like, that's not how this should work. Like, we just need vaccination records. Like, we need you to limit your API so that it just gives us vaccination records so we can verify that information with the local, the local dog groomer or boarding company or whatever. And the fact that they were like, that was like awesome. It was an amazing conversation for me because I'm like, oh, here's one company that has the opportunity to get all of the data, but they're actually taking a moral stance, and they're like, no, we are going to provide, we're actually here to solve a problem, and we think the problem we're solving is actually valuable and gives value back to the industry as a whole. And as such, we are going to take a higher ethical stance and only take the data that we're saying we're going to take and not actually take anything. So I could go on and on about just like how, but those are just some examples. Yeah. That's my soapbox.
No. I mean, I really appreciate you, Clint, really diving deep into these answers, because this is a bit of a mysterious side of things, in vet med. So it's always a pleasure for us to get more deeper insight onto cybersecurity, how important it is, and how much of an impact it can occur if it goes in the other direction. So now, it's also important to understand the whole scenario. It's important to understand what the problem is, because a lot of the practice owners and people working in vet are not aware of the problems themselves, right? So, really appreciate you for really diving deep into explaining what those problems are and bringing awareness to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes I have to catch myself because like sometimes I feel like I'm just shouting into the wind. And so I get on my soapbox and I'm like, oh, wait, I'm ranting here. People's eyes are probably starting to bleed at this moment because I'm just talking too much here, So it's like, I gotta like, all right, shorten it up. Brevity, Clint, brevity,
Absolutely. Now, just looking ahead to 2026 and beyond, what innovations or shifts in veterinary technology do you believe will have the biggest impact on profitability, team efficiency, or even client experience?
Yeah, honestly, like just something I still believe in every day. And it might seem insane because it seems like we're talking ourselves, like as a business owner, I'm talking myself out of revenue. But honestly, like simplify the hospital. Like how simple can you make the moving pieces in the practice, right? Can you, like if you are in the IDEX umbrella and you're using EasyVet and you're using the IDEX primary radiology, like in IDEX lab equipment, like move everything, IDEX is going to love me for this, but it's like, move the rest of your stuff under the IDEX umbrella. So it's like one thing, right? So it's like you have one thing under one umbrella. And then, at that point, if you're cloud-based, like, do you need a server? Absolutely not. Get rid of it. There's no reason an IT guy should be telling you that you need a server. It makes zero sense. It's expensive. It's expensive to maintain. Like, you don't need it. All the things that server does, it can go somewhere. It can go somewhere else, and we can move those things somewhere else. Get like basically, like getting like business grade equipment, I think is also really important. A lot of guys will we had a conversation with a new hospital that's being built out. He's like, oh, I went to Best Buy the other day and I was like, oh, what can I get? And I'm like, you don't want to go there. Like you're getting consumer stuff. I could go into like what the differences are there, but consumer grade stuff, it'll last you a year or two. A good example is we had a number of hospitals that like want to lean into the whole Chromebook thing once they go cloud-based. Like, sure, go for it. And then like a year goes by and they're like, dude, these things last like a month. And it's like, because they're not meant to be hammered, in an environment with pet hair. They're not meant to manage the heat. It's like, so you would have been better off spending $800 on a real business class computer with a solid warranty. So if anything happened to it, there's no extra cost to you. It's fixed in 72 hours. Versus, dropping $500 or $350 every year on this thing that keeps crashing. Duplicate internet, I think, is probably a worthwhile investment. Do you have a decent, two internet lines? Because especially if you're cloud-based, you're 100% dependent on the internet. So do you have actually two lines that will swing over automatically? So if one goes down, you don't even have to think about it. Like the other one just comes back up. I think that would be important. And also a robust Wi-Fi network. With so many, wanting to lean into, like right now, hospitals that want to use tablets. A lot of our hospitals are loving using the Lenovo Yogas because they're kind of like, they can function as a tablet, but also as a laptop, and then they have a great warranty and good support. But you need like a robust Wi-Fi network to manage so those things can float around. So like, and again, you don't have to invest a lot of money, I think, for some good access points to like $150 a piece, and they just need to be configured and set up. So like, do you have a good Wi-Fi network? Aside from that, like, get rid of as much stuff as possible. You can always buy more stuff. Like whenever we talk to a new startup, we're always like, they're like, oh, well, how many computers do we need? As few as possible. Like we can always, you can always open the door and be like, we're so busy, we have more staff, we need more stuff. We can always place another order. We can always get more computers in there. But that just requires more spending, we're spending more money. So like if we can get you open with a few devices and have everything running really smoothly. A great example is we just helped open a urgent care up in Maine, and they started with 5 devices, 5 computers throughout the entire practice, and they were so busy after they opened, 3 months later, like, we need like another 6 devices. Great, no problem, we can help you figure that out. That's an easy solution to have. Like, that's a great problem to have. But do we need to drop another $5,000 to $6,000 on equipment before we open the doors if we don't know we're going to need it? Because that $5,000 could have been, one of your employees' salaries that month, if like things were tight. So it's like, how can you lean it out, like clean it up and understand everything you have? If you know what you have and it's super simple and easy, you're going to be so much happier. And then at that point, then you can look at like maybe more investing in some like additional software tools. But again, like I think if you're on one of the decent cloud-based practice management system, it's probably going to do 90% of the things you want it to do. And there's some like other fancy bells and whistles out there. But your time would probably be spent like just leaning out the practice from a technology perspective and just like making it simpler. The simpler, the better.
Love it. And for all our listeners tuned in, what's one key takeaway to wrap all this up? What's one key takeaway for them to take if they could only take one?
One key takeaway. Don't get wrapped up in the hype. I think is probably the biggest thing. If you're an Avmark hospital and you love Avmark, run it, use it. Yeah, it may not be around in the next 10 years. They may force you to sunset it. But honestly, just don't get caught up in the hype. If there's a tool that really is going to solve your problems, then lean into it. But get buy-in from your other team. And if you don't get buy-in from your other team, then it's just not going to get deployed well, and you're going to have pushback, and there's going to be a lot of problems. And so it's anytime we do a cloud conversion, we have members from every department, and who's going to be the key kind of contact in each department, so you can get buy-in from everybody and they feel like it's a group decision to make their lives better, and it makes things way better. So yeah, I would say just don't buy into the technology hype. I was up in Canada, and there's this guy came to me and he's like, look, I still manage all my herds on paper, and listening to you, it sounds like I'm way safer. And I'm and he's like, but I feel like I need to use more technology. And I'm like, do you feel like you have efficiency problems? Do you feel like your business is doing well on paper? He's like, yeah. And I'm like, I could tell you to buy more technology stuff, but it just it doesn't, in some cases, it doesn't make sense to buy more stuff or do more technology just for the sake of technology. If paper works for you and you're functioning, do run paper. You got to do what works for you and makes you efficient. Yeah, there's probably better ways to do it with a younger, more tech savvy person, but if you're solid on paper, run with the paper, and it may sound stupid coming from a tech guy, but I just hate I hate the world of selling people stuff just because oh, you have to have this. Well, maybe you don't, I'm here to answer your questions, help you understand what we think you might need. But you have to make that decision at the end of the day, and you should be making a decision because you actually understand it and you know why you need to spend the money on it, and it makes sense to you from a business standpoint, not just because some tech guy told you to.
Thank you so much, Clint, for sharing your expertise, your vision, and deep commitment to helping veterinary teams thrive in a rapidly changing digital landscape. Today's conversation reminded us that technology isn't just a set of tools. It's the backbone of efficiency, security, and sustainable growth. And when used intentionally, it empowers every clinic team to work smarter, safer, and more confidently. To our listeners, thank you for joining us. Whether you're an associate trying to navigate the digital tools in your clinic, a manager looking to streamline workflows, or an owner aiming to future-proof your practice, we hope today's episode gives you clarity, actionable insights, and a sense of possibility. Your practice truly deserves the technology that works for you and not against you. If what Clint had shared today resonated with you, I encourage you to explore the work he's doing to help clinics secure their data, modernize their systems, and build tech stacks that truly support their teams. And before we close, a quick reminder, you can still book a complimentary practice growth strategy session with Lila, where you'll get personalized analysis of your online presence and a 6-month growth roadmap tailored to your practice. Visit www.veterinarybusinessinstitute.com/MSM to schedule your free session. From all of us here at the Veterinary Business Podcast, thank you for showing up, for investing in your clinic's future, and for embracing technology as a tool to elevate your team, your patients, and your practice. Remember, when your systems are secure, your workflows are smart, and your team is empowered, technology isn't just functional, it's transformational. Until next time, Don Nadisha signing off.